There's kind of a pandemic of free estimates running around in the industry, right? And I think I call it a pandemic because I think it's really bad for consumers, right? Because estimates aren't free. They're extremely expensive if you do them right.
What is the difference between a roofer who is filing a claim and a public adjuster who is filing a claim?
So a roofer is probably using the tools that are easily, readily available to them. The 800 number, the agent, right? It's easy, right? But you got to think, these insurance companies probably spend a lot of money on these call centers and they don't have to.
There is something like material warranty too. So what is the difference between a material warranty and a roofing claim?
Well, a material warranty is going to cover things that are very, very difficult to prove, number one. Probably 90% of the time is not what's wrong with the roof. It's not the reason that the roof is broken. About 90% of the time.
And you are saying that every claim has a different category. Is it legitimate to file hail and wind claim combined every single time?
Did it rain? Yes or no? Did it hail? Yes or no? Did the wind blow? Yes or no? Right? Well, you can have any combination of that at any given time, right? So when you say hail or you say wind, you're not saying the other one, right? But whenever you say hail and wind, they both have to be on that date.
So how can a contractor identify that a PA isn't giving his full energy or his full dedication to this specific claim?
Come forward and say, what do you do in this situation? What kind of commitment to the client can you make? Otherwise, I'm going to eat $4,000 because as the contractor, I'm going to finish the job with the best materials, the way it's possible, the best way possible. And in the end, if you don't go get it, I'm going to eat the $4,000.
Cool. You just mentioned that it is one thing that you have to categorize and split up your invoices and make subtotals that make it easier for the PA to do his job. What are the other things besides this that a roofer or a contractor can do in order to make your job easier?
Label your pictures and have a map. I don't care if you draw it on a napkin. Have a map and take pictures that, I guess, twofold. Make it to where someone who's never been to the house, who's looking at everything from a computer, can tell what picture goes to what part of the house.
What are the common type of disputes that normally happen between homeowners and the insurance, and how like a roofer or a contractor can be aware of them, and what are their solutions?
A lot of the time the homeowner has one set of concerns. The contractor has a different set of concerns. And the PA has a completely different set of concerns. And then if there's an appraiser or an attorney involved, they have completely different set of concerns.
What should be the step-by-step approach of a PA or a contractor if the insurance company is kind of lowballing the claim?
Well, the first thing you need to do is figure out why. There's 3 ways that a claim can be short.
Hey everyone, welcome to the latest episode of the Roofing Millionaires podcast, the only roofing podcast where we don't promote anyone and we don't sell you anything. In this episode, we are sitting down with Chet Sells from Sells Contracting, and Chet has been a contractor for over 15 years. Then he transitioned into being a public adjuster. That's why we have recorded this episode to cover all the foundational knowledge about insurance claims that roofing contractors need. And we have also discussed how you can navigate through the complexities in an insurance claim and provide the best solution to the homeowner. This episode is more like an insurance claim masterclass for the roofers, covering all the foundational topics and mistakes, teaching you how you can work with the PAs to get the most out of your insurance claim and how you can deal with the insurance companies for the best interest of the homeowners. Do like and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want us to bring more roofing experts like this on the show that can help you become more valuable to the homeowners and grow your roofing business as well. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Roofing Millionaires podcast, Chet. It's great to have you here on the show today. How are you feeling today and what's going on in your life these days?
Man, I'm coming off a cold, but it's a great Friday, so I'm glad to be here and I appreciate you having me.
Let's just begin with your life story so our audience just have a context about whom they are listening or watching, and then we'll talk about your knowledge, your expertise, and the stuff that you have been through, and we'll try to make this conversation as valuable as we can for the roofing community. So let's just begin with, who is Chet Sells?
Well, I've been a contractor for almost 15 years now. Started that after I went to college and got a business degree and did every. I never built a bridge and I didn't build a skyscraper, but I built almost everything else.
Okay.
And one thing led to another. I got invited or recruited. I don't know what it is, but to do some work in different states. And it turned out that the work I was doing was more of a consulting capacity than it was, subcontractor or contractor work. And then that kind of led to public adjusting. And, those three things kind of sound different, but well, I've really been doing the same thing for about 15 years. Just figuring out what scopes are, what values are, sequence of trades, figuring out, which trade needs to go first. No matter if I'm representing a homeowner as a public adjuster or if I'm a contractor that's actually doing it, or if I'm, the outsourced solution for another contractor who's just not quite as strong in that point. Right. And so that's kind of taken me all over, definitely all over the Gulf states, some to the Midwest and a little bit into the Rockies. So I like to travel and I like new projects and new jobs. And, the challenging ones, those are my favorite.
So you are a public adjuster right now, and that's why I want this episode to be, as we have discussed before as well, like I want this episode to be a foundational knowledge or a platform or a video that anyone, homeowner, a roofer, or even an insurer or a public adjuster can look or watch, and they can have the foundational knowledge or how to handle stuff, and they can learn that. So I have divided this episode or our conversation into 4 phases. First of all, I am going to ask you some questions about the foundational stuff of roofing insurance claims. Then we'll dig deep into the common misconceptions that people have and the confusions that they have, either the homeowners or the roofers. Then we'll discuss about the disputes and the appraisals, that when is the right time to apply for certain situations or how should you handle something that is going out of your hands. And at the end, the 4th phase will be where we will be talking about AI and how the technology can revolutionize these insurance claims and how it can make things easier for the homeowners as well as for the roofers. So let's just begin with my first question to you is, what is the whole process of claiming your roof insurance?
Claiming?
Yeah.
Making a claim?
Yeah.
Well, the whole purpose is to be made whole, is to get back like you were before the event, you know, in any circumstance, roof, whether it be storm, whatever it may be. And I think everybody kind of understands that, but I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding and confusion around how. How do you do it? How
Yeah.
should you do it?
Yes, that's what I
Is
asked.
one
Yes.
way better than the other way? Is one way just a wives' tale? That everybody, or is it just, oh, everybody does it this way, and so I'm going to do it that way? But really, it's fairly technical, and the instructions are pretty specific, and they're written in your policy. And how you actually should do it is spelled out there, right? And it says things like, not exactly, but it'll say things like, give us prompt notice, right? Well, some people don't do that. There's some contractors that would encourage people, well, you don't have enough hail. You don't have enough wind. You don't have enough damage. Wait till the next storm, right? I can't say that when I was first beginning that I wasn't guilty of that a couple of times, just out of learning and not knowing any better. But your policy says give prompt notice, right? And your policy covers from a starting period to an ending period, right? And so it covers, hail and wind during those periods. So you can't just have damage and then just wait until another period, because what you're doing is you're filing for a thing that happened outside of the start and stop of the contract or the insurance policy, right? And a lot of people do that, and it's really dangerous. I see a lot of arguments online of people saying, well, that's what makes rates go up, is when they have all these claim costs from sending guys out, because you guys, right, and I don't know, I've never figured out who they're talking to, but they say you guys are filing everything that you possibly can. It's like, well, I don't know if we're filing it or not filing it. I think the insurance is the one that files it, right? But we're just giving prompt notice, right? That we think we may have a claim, right? We just want to give prompt notice. Because if we don't have a claim, or if it ends up being not that big of a deal, well, guess what? We did our part of the contract, right? Because it's an insurance contract. We just don't ever want to be caught, slipping up on one of our duties, right? And one of them is give prompt notice, right? So, a lot of that comes from guys saying, oh, well, I'm never filing them unless there's, 3 or 4 hits per square. Where did that come from, right? I mean, damage is damage. If it's got 3 hits on the whole roof, that's damage, right? I'm not saying you should get in a knockdown, drag out fight with whatever insurance company you have over that, right? But your contract or your insurance policy requires you to give prompt notice, right? And that's different depending on what state you're in. How long is that? I mean, it's very subjective, so you should do it as soon as possible, right? Now, how are you going to do that, right? They have and they make available these 800 numbers. They're 24/7. They're on holidays, weekends. They're always available to you. And you got to think, anytime that something's costing someone money to volunteer it to you to make your life easier to report that. Because back in the day, you had to mail it in or fax it right. You got to think there's no such thing as a free lunch, right? So what I've found is, and not all the time, but a lot of times they'll use those call centers to have questioning protocols that ask you questions that really are kind of loaded
that you
questions.
don't understand. Yeah.
Or that you don't really understand what they're really getting at or what you're saying when you answer, because like the nature of the question itself requires you to speculate, right? And if you speculate, there's almost 100% chance that you are not going to be 100% accurate. You're going to say too much, too little, too much left, too much right. You're not going to get it exactly right. What are your normal food expenses per month? I don't know. I could probably get close, right? But that's one of those questions that, and that comes up maybe not on the first call, but it comes up. That's just an example. Well, guess what? A good answer to that is, I'd prefer not to speculate. I'm seeking full coverage under the policy. This is my call that I'm giving you prompt notice, right? I just want to do step 1 right now. Right. I haven't had enough time. If that's one of your requirements that you want me to do, sure, I'd love to cooperate because I know I have to do that too. Right. But I'd prefer not to speculate. Right. And sometimes they get kind of pushy on the phone. Well, I can't process your claim and I can't give you a claim number unless you speculate. That's where I kind of start having a rub. Right. That's not right because all you're trying to do is give prompt notice. Right. If you're following the rules. Right. And so that's why I really encourage people, if you can, figure out what your claim is really quick with a professional of your choice, whether it be a public adjuster, whether it be a contractor, mitigation guy, whatever it is. Get to the bottom of it like really fast. Don't wait and let the insurance take control and, give you some money a few weeks down the road and send their guys and then see how much budget you have and then go try to find somebody that fits that budget. Go pick somebody that you trust, like right off the bat. Figure out what the scope should be, figure out what the budget should be, right? And then start telling the insurance company that's what it is, right? Because then you're making your claim, right? And then you don't have to speculate, right? And you're probably, if you do it that way, you're probably going to be avoiding if the narrative that they took, was incorrect or had false assumptions or was based on incorrect foundation because maybe the adjuster that came out wasn't as experienced as the person that you selected right off the bat, right? And when you do that, you're building a paper file. You're already in with your contractor, your PA, your whoever it is, because it's already selected. That person knows that they've got your job, right? And a lot of policyholders undervalue that, knowing that they have your job. I can promise you're going to get a way more well-written estimate and consideration of all the trades from the guy that knows he's got your job and has your deductible like in his pocket. Why? Well, because he knows it's his job and he knows that he doesn't have to worry about that. Go do a bunch of free work to try to earn your business, right? But there's kind of a pandemic of free estimates running around in the industry, right? And I think I call it a pandemic because I think it's really bad for consumers, right? Because estimates aren't free. They're extremely expensive if you do them right, right? And that's what it leads a lot of guys to doing the contingency contracts and, things like that. How many things can I do, right? I've got a little bit of money if I need to buy measurements. I've got a little bit of money if I need to come back out. I've got a little bit of money if I need to make some calls, right? I'm not going to do all this for free, right? So you're going to get a lot more consideration. I would venture to say that the consideration you're going to get is going to come back with a diagnosis, if you will, to cure your house of the damages exponentially higher. There's not going to be as many halfway through the job, oops, we missed something, surprises, whatever you will. And that's the thing that consumers hate the most is change orders in the middle of the job or supplements or right in the middle of the job. They think, oh, well, the contractor just, took the job at a low price and then, took the job up. Well, no, you were shopping for 3 different estimates or 5 different estimates. You didn't pick somebody, right? That costs about $800 to $1,200 if you do it right. By the time you spend gas and Eagle views and estimators and a couple trips out there and stuff like that, right? So you got to kind of think about that, right? Like if you didn't pay the guy anything and then he missed some stuff on the estimate, right? Because he was just trying to get it in real quick and get it to you. You can't really be frustrated during the job whenever he missed something. Because, I mean, even if you do it the way that I'm talking about, you're still going to miss stuff, right? But if you really have no incentive to get it right because you don't even know if you have the job yet, you're definitely going to miss stuff, right? And so that kind of covers 2 points, right? You tell me how far you want to go into that, but that covers 2 points. Number one, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't be looking for estimates. And number two, I shouldn't be calling the 800 number, right? So, I've got my ideas about, I think it works best or how I think it is the best, right? And, I've kind of alluded to that in the fact that we'll pick somebody, give them your deductible, let them know that they've earned the job and it's not going anywhere. They're safe. Let them focus. Tell them, like, I want you to focus on making sure you don't miss anything, making sure that all the damages are fixed exactly like they need to be, right? That's where I want you spending your time, right? Because I want to be back to normal, right? I mail these things in. I mail them like snail mail, first class certified, right? I email them to the agent, right? When I do, I tell them about the claim, right? That way I don't get stuck on some, 24-hour hotline, uh, trying to dodge these questions that are requiring me to speculate. I get to write the email and I get to push send and I get to decide what goes into it, right? And then in every state that I work in, they have to respond within a certain amount of time, right? So it kind of takes that, and again, they don't do it every time, but they do it enough that it discourages me from advising people and suggesting that it's a good idea to call that number, right? They do it enough that, I can call the number, but I have license, I have CE, I've done this for 15 years. But the average person, if you get, one that's going to start using that as a kind of a weaponize that process, right? Because they have a right to investigate. They have a right to ask questions. And I'm not suggesting that we don't cooperate with that. But when it first happens, nobody's even got measurements. We don't know how deep it is. We don't know, the breadth, the depth. We don't know what's underneath. We don't know anything, right? So it's just not fair to say we're not going to provide you a claim number unless you make all these speculations that we're going to hold you to later, right? Like, when was your roof put on? How many people know that? They just don't know that, right? So in an email, you can say, I'm doing my duty of promptly notifying you. I've had a storm. I don't know what all was included in the storm, but I know there was hail. It was on this date. I don't know what all it did. I'm seeking full coverage for under my policy. I do notice, a shingle in the yard, a tree branch that was down, and my trampoline is in the neighbor's yard, right? But that's just what I've noticed, and I'm not an expert, and I've hired somebody, and they're going to be looking at the scope. I just wanted to promptly notify you. I wanted you to assign anybody that you want. I wanted to welcome to, cooperate with them. I wanted to welcome you to my home or my business or what kind of property it is. So you can do what you need to do or whatever you want to do as fast as you possibly can. And then you push enter and it's done. And there's not some person that's being graded on, well, did you ask them 4 times this invasive question that we know that no one knows yet? I don't know if that happens. I feel like that happens, Um, so, I'm not against people faxing it or taking it to their agent. I mean, a lot of times a lot of agents will talk you out of your claim. They'll say things like, your deductible's, $8,000. And it's like, there's no reason to bring that up. Whatever it is, that's what it is. It's not going to change. It was set last year. It's not going anywhere. The only reason you bring that up is to remind me that I'm not going to get away with all this for free and kind of disincentivize me from using the product that I bought, right? I can't help but think that they have some kind of a monetary gain from doing that somehow, some kind of advantage. But that's one of the reasons why, I almost don't suggest people to call their agent either, right? And that's what everybody wants to do. They want to call the 800 number. They want to call the agent. Telephones just they're not nice in this game. Like if everything goes great, great. If you have that experience, great. But I deal with people. The reason I have a job as a public adjuster is that it doesn't go great all the time, right? And if there's a way to do it where you don't have to take a chance, like why not? And making an email, pushing enter, they have to respond. And you kind of take that potential problem and the way that some of them have weaponized that, you kind of take that weapon away by sending the email, right? And doing it for 3 shingles and a limb and a trampoline, right? Because there's a lot of contractors that they want to kind of inject, and I'm guilty of it. I've done it before I knew better. Well, you don't file every claim. That's why the insurance companies are hard headed, and that's why they do the things they do. Guess what? You don't get to file the claim. The insurance files it, right? You do your duty as a homeowner, right? You give prompt notice. You have to do that, right? You have to cooperate with their investigation. If they want to inspect, you have to let them go. If they want to come back, you have to let them do it again, right? You have to mitigate the damage. You have to maintain the property, not let it, fall to pieces just because you're not taking care of the property. You have to pay your bill, right? And if you change the property, like you build a building or you knock a building down, you have to tell them, right? Now, you may have others, but those are the basic ones that are pretty much in every single policy, right? And so that policy is a contract. And those are the rule books. Those are the things that, as a homeowner, a policy owner, business owner, whatever, you gave them your money and said, if something happens, you're going to give me money to fix it. But that wasn't the end of it. You also said, I make all these promises too, right? So if you break the deal because, contractor Fred up the street thinks that, well, it's just not that big of a deal. It's only about $600 worth of damage. You shouldn't
He's gonna
file
get
it,
the money anyway. Yeah.
right? Like, listen, you should give prompt notice. And if you don't want to make a big deal out of it, don't make a big deal out of it. If they say, are you sure? Be like, I don't really want to claim on my record, but I know I've got to give prompt notice. And here's the things I've seen. Y'all do with it whatever you want, but I've given you notice, right? And then maybe you go fix it, maybe you don't, but don't not do what you're supposed to do, right? Because in the situation that you're going to need them to do what they are supposed to do when they don't, you have to perform first as the policyholder. You have to perform first.
Okay. So what I have summarized so far from what you have said is that you never have to, like, most likely you don't need to call the 800 numbers and you don't need to speculate, because if you do that, you are in trouble. And the second thing you have to do is that you just don't have to get too many estimates. You have to pick someone and pay your deductible and just let them handle this, because you are no expert in this. So that is a perfect approach. And when you said that there are no free lunches, I agree with you. And if roofers do this, this happens with roofers as well. Like, if I tell you there are marketers, exactly the same happens with them. They say that we are not going to charge anything up front and you're going to get this. And those marketers waste their ad spend, and roofers think they are getting a cheap deal, but they are wasting their ad spend. And at the same time, that's the same what's happening here in this process too. So the question I have here, Chat, that what is the difference between a roofer who is filing a claim and a public adjuster who is filing a claim?
So a roofer is probably using the tools that are easily, readily available to them. The 800 number, the agent, right? I'm not picking on anybody. I've been a roofer for 15 years. I've done it. It's easy, right? But you got to think these insurance companies probably spend a lot of money on these call centers, and they don't have to, right? So like that's probably not a good idea, right? So when they do that, they they call in and then they let the insurance start asking questions, and the questions start setting the narrative, and the narrative steers the manager that if they don't get what they want, they're going to argue with later. So, you're setting out on this, I don't know, maybe I'll make a bad metaphor here. You're setting on this journey across the desert and you're like, I'm just not going to take water. Like you're just starting off on the wrong foot, Now, I'm not saying that a roofer can't get engaged, get a contract together, get a scope together, mail that in. I'm not saying that they can't. They just don't, right? And I know that a lot of times they're successful. They get enough that they can go do their work and they're happy, and that's why they probably don't ever revisit or reevaluate that. And they don't say, I need to
Yes.
I need to do this a different way because, whatever. I bet it works 60-70% of the time, right? But as a public adjuster, I deal with the 30 or 40% that it doesn't work, or the guy becomes stubborn. And then by the time he's stubborn, well, you filed hail because you found it, but the hail was 3 years ago and now they don't have rights to it, but there was a wind date. But now I got to file another claim, or they try to make me file another claim because the wind was last week and we could have gotten it paid for wind, but you called hail because you think that's easier, right? No matter what you do, no choice is a choice, right? And you need to consider that. You need to realize that, like, whether you're a homeowner, policy owner, public adjuster, or a roofer, contractor, whatever. When you say hail, that means you didn't say everything else. When you say last week, that means you didn't say last month. Do you have a meteorology degree? Do you have pictures? Did the homeowner see it? Right? So you're making choices, right? And the combination of those choices together are the facts. And when you apply to the facts, that's when you realize if you're covered, not covered, if how much coverage you have, if it's going to be easy or hard, if you're going to get partially covered, but then partially denied, right? Keeping it fairly elementary. So, we're talking to homeowners, we're talking to contractors. Contractors say, well, I know where to call it hail and I know what, right? It gets way more complicated. Just remember that every time you say something, you're making a choice, right? If you don't say something, you're making a choice. Like if you let them say something that's not correct and you don't know it's correct and you don't correct it, you're letting the story get built. You're letting the facts get built. And if that's not true, and that's the thing that if they realized was different would cause the claim to get paid, you're getting into the desert with no water, right? And that's the place you want to stay away. So I just think that it's not that contractors can't do it. I think that it works so many times when they don't do it that it's just not profitable or feasible for them to consider doing it the way that a PA would do it, right? And the PA is going to do it that way because, well, for one, they deal with the troublesome ones, for one, and that's their job, and so they're going to be more careful, right? I know there's going to be contractors watch this and they say, "Oh, well, I know what I'm doing." I'm not saying you don't know what you're doing. I'm saying that you're in a hurry trying to make a bunch of money. I get it. I've been there, right? But in doing so, you're making decisions that if it doesn't work, if it's one of those ones that doesn't work, you're choosing for that homeowner, you're choosing for that public adjuster. And it's not that you're, permanently ruining the claim, but you're letting the insurance have an argument that says, well, the contractor said, the contractor said, the contractor said, right? You have to undo all that, right? So what's the big complaint, right? Is, oh, well, public adjusters take forever. Insurance claims, homeowners, insurance claims take forever, right? Well, I wonder why. right? This is one of the reasons why, is because unknowingly or knowingly, or, maybe a little bit too confident in what you do know and what you don't know, somebody has gotten the wrong facts into the story and the insurance misunderstands them. And so you have to unwind that and then wind back up what actually is the story. That way, the claim can be considered for what it is and what it can be proven on the merits, empirical data, instead of what got established over time, right? And so I think that's the main difference between public adjusters and contractors filing the claim.
And what I feel is that if I am a roofer and uh, I should think or I should realize that the insurance company, they want a reason just to deny my claim or just to save their money. So if I am filing the claim and I have 80% chances of doing or making any error, and if a public adjuster files a claim and they have like 10 or 20% chances of making an error, I should definitely delegate this to the public adjuster because I am getting my money either ways.
You could, but a lot of guys are like, well, I don't want to pay 10% for saving 20% of the deals because I'll just live off the 80. So maybe not like I don't know that I would agree that's a good argument that, well, you should get the public adjuster because they're not going to make the error. I mean, as a contractor, I mean, I am a contractor. So like, I'd be like, I don't care. I'll live off the 80 and I know what to do about the 20, and I'm not going to screw them up that bad, but maybe like have a public adjuster that shares with you these errors and other errors and like what they are and how to avoid them, right? That'll teach you, that'll share this, right? And then maybe he's got a system. Maybe you already know it. You don't need to learn it. You're already smart enough. You already know it as a contractor. But maybe you just don't have a system that makes it worth it, right? You're just like, man, that's going to slow me down, or my sales guys won't do that, or
Yes.
it's not worth pissing my sales guys off because they're the ones that really, bring home the bread and they don't want an extra task, right? Well, maybe you need a PA that just like has a form or has a system or has some suggestions on how other contractors, because PAs know a lot of contractors. They see a lot of different strategies and ideas. Maybe you need a PA just to share that with you. You know what I mean? Like, and a good one will. They don't get paid for that, right? But there's a lot of things that they'll do to build that relationship because there's going to be a time when you do need them, right? And maybe that's not the reason you need them, but I can think of several ways that I could advise and help a contractor not just understand what those errors might be, but develop systems and easy, feasible ways to get everybody in his company not making those errors with not too much heartache.
Okay.
Right.
You just mentioned that there are a lot of strategies. Yeah. You just mentioned that there are a lot of strategies and ideas that they have. So what is the perfect strategy or claim strategy that works for you every time, or like that you adapt?
I've got to wrap that up into saying, tracking statistics. Like you need to track everything so you can do the statistics. So if you have a
Tell me
blue
more on
insurance
that.
company, well, if you have like a blue insurance company with a hailstorm on a residential that's a one story in the city, you need to be able to kind of know if that always gets paid the same or doesn't get paid the same, right? If it's a red insurance in the country on a 3-story business and it's wind, not hail, you need to know like how that one kind of shakes out, right? Different materials. Right? You need to be like collecting data because I can more directly answer your question of like, this is the perfect claim strategy, and I will.
Yeah.
But I got that from my own statistics, and I think like the best answer that's like the most inclusive for everybody is run your own statistics, track everything, right? And then run for a couple of years and then look at the statistics and figure out like which jobs paid good, which jobs paid bad, and look at what they have in common. Because then you know what you're after. And once you know what you're after, right, then you can go figure out where it is or where you can find it. And then you can train your sales guys to go find more of it, right? And now you know that if that's the only thing that you're hunting for, right? If you're another bad metaphor, if you're whale hunting, you're not going to come back with a shark on the boat, right? Like, because you're only looking for one type of thing, but you know it's that thing that made you the most money in the past, right? So that's how I developed this. But more specifically, I think the path that works the best, if you have a homeowner who's not about to sell their house, who's patient, who's willing to, wait and cooperate and pick a contractor right off the bat, and either doesn't want to even touch it or handle it at all because they're busy, or, it gives them anxiety or whatever, or just understands that, like, you know what, there's licensed people that can do this better than me. I'm just going to let them do it because I want the best possible outcome. And you get the perfect clients, right? Homeowner, policy owner, business owner, and you have good coverage and you have good damage. That's the perfect scenario for the contractor bringing the public adjuster in from the very, very get go, right? Not worrying about that extra 10% that they could get on their own, right? Because that's the big rub. I want to share 10% of what I know I'm going to get. Because my statistics, this is why I encourage people to run statistics. My statistics say that the carriers will pay about 42% of what they owe, right? My consulting statistics that I've kept since about 2015 over multiple size companies, like $2 million companies, $30 million companies, all these companies, most contractors get about 30 to 50% supplement, right? Some of them get closer to 60. Some of them only are okay with 20, right? But about 30 to 50% supplements, right? How many times does 42 go into 100? It's a lot. It's at least 200%, right? So if the insurance pays you 42%, right? 42 and 42 is 84. You got 16 more. 16 is about a third. It's about 230% that you have to, from their number, that you have to go up before you're at what I've gotten, right? So if that's what I'm seeing over hundreds of claims, right, in multiple states, then, and some guys are like, well, I just want to do the roof. I don't care about the gutters and the fence and the window screens. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. But why do you not care if the homeowner cares about it, right? Like, maybe they do care about it. Maybe you're great at doing the roof, but they find somebody really crummy to do all those other things because they don't have any money. And then that guy rips them off, right? They're going to have a negative impression about insurance claims in general. And it's not going to be so easy to get their job next time because they're not going to want to do it, right? And they're going to have somebody out there tell them, it's not that bad. Don't file. I'll patch it. Somebody that wants money now, right? So, like, I want to always think about, like, lifetime customer value, and I want to turn these people into, like, lifetime clients, like, over and over and over again. And I don't want to do anything like, okay, I'm just roofing it. I don't want to do the fence. Okay, that's fine. But I'm always thinking, like, am I leaving them in a bad spot to where they're, going to go shopping off the yellow pages and probably, I know they don't have a budget, right? So, like, the only guy that's going to sell you a $10,000 Mercedes is the guy that's going to sell it to you, and, like, it doesn't have something like it's going to fall apart when you drive it off, right? Or it doesn't have a motor, right? You can't get that deal, right? So, like, you're leaving that homeowner who doesn't know that he's shopping for something he can't get to go get it. Like, I don't know. I'm not. And here's the deal: the public adjuster can fix that and make money off of it, and then maybe give you free advice. You know what I mean? Like on how to do better strategy, right? Maybe that's the only thing that you get from him, right? But he gets a job from that, and he takes care of that guy. He makes you look good, right? Every once in a while, he gets a job or she gets a job that has no contractor, and the policyholder says, I have no idea who to use. Who should I use? Right? Maybe he brings that job to you because he knows you do good work, and he says, hey, I don't care who you use. I can only tell you that, this company has done 17 jobs and I haven't ever heard a complaint, right? And they're in your area. I mean, that's about the extent the public adjuster can get into it with, right, whatever. You can make recommendations. You can suggest people. I mean, I suggest people, like, when it's something critical or it's something that's like stucco or something like that, where there's not very many people that do it, or it's like engineering. I'll say this is what I would do if it were me. I would recommend this company or that company, right? I learned about that company from working with that company, right? So these guys are like, well, I don't want to bring a PA in from the very get-go because I don't want to give away 10%. It's a strategic relationship that is mutually beneficial to both parties, right? Even on the ones where you're just doing the roof and you don't care about the other stuff, that's a good job for the public adjuster to get. And then you know what? Maybe he helps you get 9 out of 10 claims instead of 8 because of implementing
Yes.
better strategies, right? And that's the kind of the symbiotic relationship to where everybody's getting better because ultimately, I think even the insurance companies would agree. I would hope that
Mm,
they would. It's really about finding everything that you can prove is damaged, getting it right, getting it done, getting on to the next one, right? Making sure everybody's got what they need, the house, the property's protected, homeowner's good, and going down to
mm,
the next one, right? Not stopping short because I'm not going to make money or not being strategic because that hurts my brain or I'm lazy, right? And like I'm kind of, picking fun at people. But at the same time, that's what it's really about, right? So why not? Why not be better? Why not be more strategic? Why not be more sophisticated?
Okay, I have a question here, Jack, that we are talking about the insurance claim, and like it happens that you file a claim when a damage occurs and you have to prompt them. But there is something like material warranty too. So what is the difference between a material warranty and a roofing claim? Like
And
a
a roof
material
claim?
warranty, yeah, yeah,
So, a material warranty is going to cover things that are very, very difficult to prove, number one. And number two,
okay,
90% of the time, probably 95, probably higher. I don't want to get to speculating, right? Probably 90% of the time is not what's wrong with the roof. It's not the reason that the roof is broken. About 90% of the time, right? 90% of the time, it's from some kind of a force, a foot, a bird, a hailstone, a
okay,
wind, right? Because Newton told us, an object at rest stays at rest, an object in motion stays in
yes,
motion. Okay. I mean, we've known this for a long time, right? So, like, most of the time, it's a force that does it. There's not any forces that manufacturer warranty covers that I know of on any manufacturer,
hmm,
right? Like if it's a
hmm,
verb, if you're describing what's wrong with the shingle and you use a verb, you're probably not covered under a manufacturer's warranty. That's what insurance policies are for, right?
hmm,
Manufacturer's warranties that I've had, that I've gotten paid and seen include things
hmm,
where you've got degradation of the material premature to its useful life. So if its useful life was 30
hmm,
years and, it's looking like it's on its last limb on year 2, something's going on
hmm,
because it doesn't do that on, a lot of these companies are Six Sigma, which means that, I think it's like 3 out of 6 million can be defective. That's like the level of assurance or whatever. Some of them are, some of them aren't. But it's a very low tolerance, but it happens, because we've got what 100 and
hmm,
something million properties, that can get hit. So when it
hmm,
happens, yeah, you should definitely do something about it. But I see people all the time wanting to wait to give prompt notice until they see what the
hmm,
manufacturer or the warranty does, right? And a lot of people want to wait to get a contractor to see what the insurance does. A lot of people want to wait because
hmm,
they don't want to stick their neck out, right? They don't want to ruin anything. They don't know what they're doing. That's why you really need a public adjuster or somebody that at least knows their way around. Because in this game, the more you stick your neck out doing the right thing, the faster and the better your
hmm,
experience is going to be, right? But people see it as like stick my neck out. Well, I don't want to hire this guy if my insurance is going to pay for it, right? I don't want to. I don't want to file an insurance claim if the warranty is going to pay for it, right? It all ties together. Like you're I want to wait. I want to wait on this. I want to wait on that. I want to wait on my old roofer to come back and make sure that
hmm,
he's not going to fix it. I get it. You don't want to spend money. You're being frugal, right? But that's the wrong due diligence, right? Like that's you're doing the best that you know what to do, right? And I know that there's contractors on here that are gonna they're gonna agree with me. They're gonna be like, yeah, dude, these guys, man, they just want to wait. They want to wait. Wait on this, wait on that, wait on the warranty claim. And there's no way there's a warranty claim, but that's why you need to pick people that have a plan, that have a strategy, that work together, because I don't know everything about every type of roof. And I know that contractors don't know everything about every type of policy, but you need to like work with people in a team to where, I may not know it, but I can get it real fast, like within 5 minutes, probably less immediately, because that's what starts getting over these trends of people waiting on warranties to pay and waiting on contractors to sign up until after the insurance and all these things. And I think that that's a trend that like we all ought to work on because it lets bad narratives get set forth. It delays things and it doesn't ultimately get people back to where they go as fast and as efficient as possible. Right. But that is the consumer sentiment in every state that I work. And, I actively try to fix that with my contractors and their referrals. I try to let their referrals be the testament of how efficient our team is. Because, like, I can tell you I'm great, right? But if your next door neighbor tells you I'm great, that's a whole different story, right? And it builds pull marketing, right? And I push contractors to say, hey, you need to like kind of take some tips here from my
Yes.
background, which is marketing. Like you can do all this work as a team and get some pull marketing, right? Push marketing is like a billboard, but that costs you money. Pull marketing is the neighbor going up to the other neighbor going, if you don't use this guy, you're crazy. Look what happened. He's got this whole team. They're amazing. Look at this picture. Look at this team. Look at this guy. Look at these credentials, right? If your neighbor came up to you and said, you're crazy if you don't use this guy, look at all this, and was like, brag like that extent. I mean, there's one thing like a referral, like, hey, yeah, I used Tom, like that's a referral, that's good. But if he's like actively going over, like that's great pull marketing. That's free. It doesn't cost money like a billboard. Right. So you can tie all this into like marketing strategy. You can tie it all into the teamwork. You can tie it into expertise. You can tie it all in to kind of condition the consumer sentiment and not and then you kind of got some momentum rolling down the hill against some of these trends that aren't the best. They're not the most efficient trends, right? But you can't swim upstream all by yourself, right? You need somebody to drift behind, right? Kind of share the load, right? And you can do that with the marketing. And then and then if you got the neighbor saying, hey, now listen, I know I told you to use that guy. He's great. Like, you're crazy if you don't use him. He's going to tell you some stuff that's weird. It's not going to make sense. It's like opposite of what all these other people are going to tell you. Just do it. Just do it. Right. Now, I don't have to tell them to do the weird thing. I don't have to tell them to do that. Right. They already know because, they were already told. Right. And then like the more, I go around or the team goes around or the coalition or the word gets out, whatever you want to call it, the more that gets out, the more that becomes the norm. Right. And so roundabout way, I think you get a PA if you have a good client that's receptive to these types of messages with good damage, good policy. You do not worry about well, let me see what I can get because I don't want to pay 10% off the bat. Right. Because if your statistics end up like mine, you're turning down like 78, 90% of what you could get because of, well, I could get it. I just don't want to. I just want to do the roof. Okay. But you can set that client up for a better situation. Right. Or I'm okay with 30%. I'm okay with that. Right. Okay. You're okay with it. But, I'm not here to change anybody's idea about what they're worth or, convince them to be higher or lower or whatever. But my question to those guys is, are you sure you're getting all the scope? Like, should that decking be replaced and you're not doing it? You know what I mean? Is that the easy way? Are you really doing that guy a service? But the easy way, all right? Because the PA will get that for sure, right? So these are kind of the things. It's like, okay, yeah, those are good points, But these other things like strategy, marketing, team, going against the trend, making it efficient. These are just byproducts. You can just make that just sweetens the pot. That just sweetens the pot, right? And then it's not about the 10%. It's about this momentum ball of like, hey, look at this way to do it, right? And then you get the message out, right? Just like, something goes viral, right? It's trying to create virality around efficient processing of insurance claim, right?
Okay. So we have discussed one misconception here that roofers aren't willing to give away that 10% and that costs them much. You have been into this for 15 years. What are the other misconceptions that roofers and the homeowners have about insurance claims and public adjusters?
Well, to touch last time on that, I've never seen that cost them money. I've only ever seen that on all the deals. I've only ever seen it make money ever, like ever. Right now, they're gonna say, "Well, how do you know? Because you don't know what I would have got." Well, you'll never know, right? But if you look at the average across hundreds of claims, it's never cost anybody any money. It really had. Another really, really bad misconception is you don't exact the storm and the wind or hail that actually did it. You don't get exact with it. You just pick the recent date, or you pick the one that you know, or you say hail because that's easier to fight the insurance company than wind is. You know, find one that's damaged and you file one for something that happened a long time ago and you don't know how close it even was. You just know there was a storm, right? You say wind and hail instead of wind or hail or wind and hail, right? So when you say wind and hail, that's a third category. A lot of contractors go, I say wind and hail. I say storm damage because that includes everything, right? No, it doesn't. Wind and hail is one category. Wind is a category. Hail is a category. Because there's hailstorms that don't wind, and there's windstorms that don't hail, and then there's storms that do both, right? And then there's days where none of it happens. Those are the four possibilities. So by picking both, you're not picking both, you're picking one. Well, if you go look the meteorology data up and that doesn't comport with what you advise, not all the time. I'll be the first to admit, not all the time. But sometimes you will have a major problem. It will get absolutely denied. Absolutely denied. Absolutely. And then you'll bring it after it's all tied in a knot, right? And then you'll judge how fast that public adjuster gets that done, right? Because that's what you're judging. Can you get it done and how fast? Because that's how I'm gonna assess your value to my contracting company. Well, here's the deal. You tied it in a knot, right? So it's like, how fast can you throw the crumbs on the floor? And then you're going to say, okay, I'm hiring a janitor. Janitor, how fast can you clean up my mess? And he's like, well, you keep doing it. You know what I mean? Like, you keep doing it. So, like, I can't ever clean it up. You know what I mean? Well, then you're not a good janitor. You're not worth $20 an hour. I'm getting rid of you, you know? And I see that happen a lot. I see that happen so much. That and other things where you think that you're judging the results, but the results that you're judging aren't from the cause that you think it is because of a lack of understanding about something fundamental, right? Because you didn't know that saying wind and hail is a third category, wind's a category, hail's a category. You didn't think about it like that. You thought wind and hail was like all of it. Right. But if you go on the meteorology data, you've got to have wind and hail on that date. Well, what if that was 4 years ago and the roof's 5 years old? You're getting denied. Right. But 1 year ago, there was hail. All you had to do was just say hail. All you had to do was look at the meteorology. All you had to do was get as accurate. And of course, this is like if the homeowner does not know, has no clue, and then it pops a leak because it got hot in the summer and as they deteriorate quicker because of the damage. Do a little research. Know your claim. This is why you don't call the freaking 800 number, right? Because you need to do your research. If you don't have a meteorologist, I've got one. I've got a meteorologist. I can get a hold of him. It's Saturday. I guarantee I can get him right now, right? Why? Because I've shared this with the contractors that I work for, and I say, don't do this, right? If anything, it costs me money, so don't be, willy-nilly spending my money. You know what I mean? But if you don't know and you're scared that you might get it wrong and you want to send the file directly my way as advised, to minimize the effort and be as efficient as possible, I'll look it up. I'll look it up while you're there, right? I'll look it up, send you the report, make you look like you got a meteorologist on call, just like that, make you look good, right? Know what you're doing before you do it. Every time you make a move, it's a decision. And you really need to think about how many decisions you're already making, right, that are not getting the best results, but you don't know that you're making them. And then you're getting appraisers or PAs or lawyers or whatever to say, hey, man, this is a problem. I need this job. I need this money and I need it now. Well, it's like whenever you take a little kid fishing with one of those poles that, you got to know how to operate, or you get a big squirrel nest in the line, right?
Father,
Opportunity.
so I have another question, Chet. that I read in a Facebook post. It was a group post on Facebook. I know you are members of the groups as well. It said that you always have to file a hail and wind claim combined because that covers both of them. And you are saying that every claim has a different category. So, like, is it legitimate to file hail and wind claim combined every single time?
Yeah. So, I mean, go outside on the next storm, right?
Hmm?
Did it rain? Yes or no? Did it hail? Yes or no? Did it the wind
Hmm?
blow? Yes or no? Right?
Hmm?
Well, you can have any combination of that at any given time, right? So when you say hail or you say wind, you're not saying the other one, right? But whenever you say hail and wind, they both
Hmm?
have to be on that date. Otherwise,
Hmm?
if there's no wind blowing on the record or there's no hail falling on the record, then your date that
Hmm?
you picked is wrong. And so the insurance is going to look for the next date around it that
Hmm?
has what you said or advise the homeowner to say, which is hail and wind, right? What if that's 5 years ago, right? It's 5 years ago and that policy wasn't current 5 years ago. And the statutory deadline for recovering under your claim is 2 years or 4 years. You're not getting that claim paid because of what you said. That's going to be a very difficult claim. That's going to take a long, long time to fix that. And an appraiser is not going to fix that problem. And a lot of guys, I've never had an appraisal not get paid. Well, take that claim to appraisal, that one's not getting paid because they don't have to. There's no coverage. It's a contract. And by what you said, hail and wind, you literally told them this isn't covered under this contract, right? So look the meteorology up.
Yeah.
Look the meteorology up before you say it. And don't just say, well, because I said hail and wind and that's all together, that means all together. No, it doesn't. It means either or both, right? It means all. That's not any category that you so choose. That's a very specific category that meteorologically you have to prove, right? Because you have to prove your loss before the insurance company is obligated to pay. That's why they offer the 800 number, is because if they come out and volunteer something, then they start getting the homeowner on their side and then say, y'all are all the bad guy if you don't agree with me, right? They're gaining the advantage by doing that. So this is why you need to be strategic and realize that, like, it's not something to argue about. Like, no, hail and wind means hail and or wind or either one or whichever category I want. It doesn't, right? Because go outside the next time it storms and it either hailed, the wind blew, or it hailed and the wind blew. But it didn't do all three. It was one of the three. It's a fact, right? And it's a provable fact. And that's what you have to base your claim off of, is a provable fact. But when you do, you'll get paid if you have damage that's covered within the policy on the home for something that's covered. It's that simple, right? When you're doing that,
That right there, yeah.
say again?
I'm saying that you just said that right there proves your argument as well, because the post I read, it was done by a roofer, and if a roofer doesn't know this, it clearly means that you are not having the knowledge that is required to file a proper claim.
And you only need to hear it one time. It's not hard to understand, right? You don't need to argue about it. I think there's somebody arguing with it online. That's kind of pointless, but it's not complicated. You just need to hear it one time, right? But this is just like one little nuance, one little thing, that makes a big deal, right? If done incorrectly, and it's commonly done incorrectly, and then it causes you to judge the results of the appraiser, or the PA, or the lawyer after the fact because of something that could have been avoided, and that's not fair. It's setting unreasonable expectations. It's completely avoidable, and yet just another reason why you need to have a good team, right? You need to have a good team that's getting out to the public that some of the ways that you should handle an insurance claim are antithetical to what your knee-jerk reaction would be, or what the trends are currently, or like what everyone else does, or the common ways of doing it, like just calling in on the phone and stuff like that. A lot of the things are counterintuitive, right? Very counterintuitive, and that just kind of goes into how I've trialed and erred and made mistakes and devised my idea of strategy, and that's it's all based on statistics of like what I just started keeping a record of it, and so that's where these things come from is this is the best way that I've ever, found. And there's only a couple ways to do it, So you just use the best combo that you can, because every time you say something or do something, you're making a decision, and the combination of all those decisions is the facts, and the facts is the story, and the story is either covered or not covered, right? And that's really what it boils down to. And I think that a lot of people over or underestimate, rather, that a lot of these little small things that they don't want to take time to do or slow down or strategize or make the sales guys do or whatever, they make a big difference on these claims that, maybe you don't care about the 20% or whatever of claims that don't go good because, you're the guy that's like, I get 8 out of 10, whatever. But maybe that 1 out of the 2 or the 2 that you don't get, maybe those are the biggest jobs all year. Well, that sucks, right? You want to lose the biggest job all year? Then I would do something about it. Well, yeah, I'm not saying something can't be done to fix it. I'm just saying work together to make sure that from all angles, contractor's angle, PA's angle, like every angle, that it doesn't get to that point in the first place,
Okay, Seth. Okay, Chet. So we have discussed about the foundational stuff on roofing claims and the common misconceptions. So I have another question for you: that are there any legal boundaries that, if compromised by a PA or a roofer, can lead to a problem for the homeowner?
Legal boundaries?
Yeah. So let me just ask that again. Are there any legal boundaries that, if compromised by a PA or a roofer, can lead to problem for the homeowners?
No, not really. Not that I can think of.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
no,
So then,
I can't really think of, I don't really understand what legal boundaries might be, but
Hmm.
I guess there's legal boundaries everywhere.
Cool. You have shared so far that a public adjuster like takes 10%. So in clear words, can you just tell our audience that how much does it cost to have a public adjuster and who covers that cost?
So public adjusters, they need to work directly for, and they have to contract directly with the policyholder.
Hmm.
And in many states, they're capped. Some states, they're not capped. The fee is usually based on a percentage or an hourly. It's typical to see a percentage be the fee. Different states have different percentages, but there's a good majority of them that, they set it at 10%. And that's probably across the board, that's probably the most typical that you would expect. But of course, it would vary based on, which state that you're in. However, there are some states that don't have caps, and I've seen public adjusters charging 30, and I've seen there's at least one state, Louisiana, that requires you to bill on an hourly basis.
Okay.
And so, that's the difference between the states. So, if you're operating across states, you really need to be up to speed with what state and then what you should expect.
Perfect. So you have just mentioned that every state is different and most roofers are operating across many different states, and we have like almost 50 states. So what are the major differences in roofing insurance claims laws or roofing insurance claim particularly when we travel across different states? Like what are the major differences?
It can really vary. There's some states that have matching laws where if you have an insurance claim, the coverage would be there to make it match, or the insurance company would have to pay to make it match. And then there's many states that do not have matching. And so I see a lot of contractors, particularly when they're hiring like supplement companies, which are basically PAs without a license. And I see that as kind of a trend. I'm not sure why you'd want to do that. If you worked with or if you work with a good PA, you're paying the same money. So why not have the license? I've never really understood why you'd want a supplementer who would do something like bring up a code argument or bring up a matching argument, because it's not going to work in a state that doesn't have matching laws. And when it doesn't work, you're either going to settle for less than what you need, or you're going to end up bringing it to a PA who's going to have to unravel the knot that that person has tied into the claim, and say, no, we're not claiming it for that reason, and then they'll have to find a reason that they are claiming it that's valid and covered under the policy. But obviously, that takes twice as long, if not more than twice as long, because you've already made a stance and you've already made a claim. And even though you can't make a claim on behalf of a homeowner, if the insurance company hears the contractor or the contractor supplementer say that, if it's advantageous to them, they're not going to forget it, right? Just because by saying, well, your contractor said, if that gives them, the next thing out of their mouth is, so therefore it's denied because there's no coverage, or, Texas or Oklahoma or wherever is not a matching state. Your contractor said that you're only wanting to replace this piece of siding because it needs to match, right? There may be a very valid reason that you need to replace that piece of siding or that side of siding. It doesn't fit. It's not going to, make them whole. I mean, there's a lot of different valid arguments, but to just willy-nilly throw out, a reason because you heard it online or because you're, got a bunch of claims and you're not licensed, you don't know any better, it can really do a lot of harm. And so that is one of the things that I get. There's a lot of online and Facebook groups. There's one in particular that, they claim that they've got the answer to every rebuttal and that contractors can just do it themselves. And a lot of their arguments focus around code and manufacturer installation requirements. And I just cringe every time that I see some of the experts in that group, give advice and make these recommendations, because you don't know what state that guy's in. You don't know what that policy says. And, a lot of contractors will be quick to tell you, no, we don't get into policy. We don't read the policy, right? Well, if you don't read the policy and you don't know if they have ordinance and law, you may have just condemned a large portion of coverage that you can't get without a PA or an appraisal or a lawyer because you said the wrong thing. Right. And you said, oh, it's code or it's manufacturer spec, or manufacturer spec is found in chapter 1 of the building code, which it is. But if there's like a physical impossibility or there's a physical impracticality, I would lead, and I always suggest that, because you don't need a PA on every single claim. So I always try to give advice that would enable people to, be able to explain these things. Not that they can argue or should be arguing without a license, because they shouldn't in most states, but, to be able to talk about physical impossibilities or physical impracticalities, that's just a matter of construction. And, the contractor knows construction better than anybody. And that's a way better reason than, these popular Facebook groups that talk about, code and manufacturer spec and everything. And I think those people just get a big following and they get paid to talk, to large groups of people. And that's more their job than getting claims paid. And so you kind of have to think about that too, is, if you really put this to the test or put this person to the test or this advice to the test, does it work? Right. And, I'd venture to question whether or not I'd trust that it would work or not if getting paid from events and speaking events is your main source of income, rather than what a public adjuster does, which is gets paid for performance or gets paid for getting good claims, approved when they were unrightfully denied, right? Which kind of just circles back around to, I really don't know why you'd want to in-house this or source it to a non-licensed person or count on, a Facebook group to do what, 48 out of 50 states have decided is complicated enough that you need and require a license and a bond and, all these credentials. I used to think as a contractor prior to becoming a PA, well, there's nothing that they can do that I can't do, but it really is a lot more complicated. And the things that mattered to me as a contractor, I quickly found that they're not as important at the PA level when you're trying to establish coverage and establish the value, because sure, those things are important, but they might be a second or third or fourth order level of importance that, yes, it does need to be addressed. But if you lead with that, you're going to take the narrative down a path that you first have to establish coverage. Because if you have the other side saying, we don't even think that we're on the hook for this, we don't even think this is covered by the policy, well, then, they're arguing one thing and you're arguing a completely different thing. And it doesn't mean that either one are or aren't valid, but you're not going to get anywhere. Right. And time is money. And I have been a contractor for 15 years. And so I understand that, time value of money, and the more jobs you do in a year, the better. And so that is one of the things that, I think only experience can teach you. And I joke and tell people, I say, I wish I could download my experience into other people's brain. Because you really do, you benefit from hiring the person who's got the license and the expertise. And it is not just a 10% cut into the job or another hand in the pot. If you have one that's going to finish the job, right? Now I have had and felt like that as a contractor myself, where I'd hired PAs and, they'll get, 85% of the way there. And this is a conversation you should probably have before you start recommending one as a contractor, is what happens if you get 85% of the way there and then say it's $100,000 claim and it starts at 20,000 and the public adjuster goes and he gets 85,000, right? Well, as a contractor, that last 15,000 is all profit or mostly all profit, right? So the materials, until you can get the materials cost, until you get the labor cost, until you can cover your overhead, you don't make any profit, right? So once you get there, you're not going to go broke taking the job. But if you get to the true price, the 100, right, then you're going to make the right amount of profit. Well, getting that last 15,000, and I've seen this happen where PAs say, well, we're not going to get there, right? And this stems from many different reasons, right? They want to play politics. They want to play diplomat with the adjuster. They know they're going to come across that adjuster in the future. And so they don't want to rub him the wrong way by, getting every nickel and dime, right? Because they want him to think that he won something. So next time they come across, he's easy to deal with, right? It's a selfish motivation in that sense, right? It also may be, here's another reason, would be that if the PA gets another $15,000, he only stands to make $1,500 on a 10% fee. Right?
Yes.
It may cost $2,000 to get that last 15,000, right?
Okay.
So it's a cash flow negative event for him.
Yes.
Right? And of course he's not going to say that, hey, it's not worth it, or I'm going to. And so of course they're not going to say, hey, I'm not rubbing this insurance adjuster the wrong way because I'm going to come across him in the future, and my future jobs are more important than your job. And of course he's not going to say, well, it's going to cost me $3,000 to get you, the last 15,000, and I'm only going to make 1,500, so I'm going to go down, right? He's not going to say this. He's going to say things like, we're done, or there is no more, or your estimate's too high, or homeowner, you're just going to have to tell your contractor to do it for less, or contractor, you're just going to have to tell the homeowner to leave things off the list, right? So he wants, or she wants, other people to compromise for what's inconvenient or a cash flow negative event for them, right? And this is one of the things that when, as a contractor, when I would visit with PAs about who I was going to recommend and who I was going to engage them with my clients, I would ask them, I would say, are you going to quit on the last 15%? Right? Because sure, it's only $1,500 for you, right? But that's $13,500 of pure profit for me, right? So I can't have you quitting. If you ever quit, right, then I can't recommend you anymore, right? Because you don't care about what matters to me, which is a fair price where I can make everything that I should make, right? And so that is a conversation that I always like to have. And I make a promise. I always say, hey, look, I'm never going to quit, right? I don't care if it's, $5,000, $6,000, right? If we spent enough time inspecting and investigating and estimating, right? And we did that in tandem with your subcontractors, and you put the prices together. And, when we built this estimate, if we really believe in this estimate and we're convicted that this estimate is the true representation of what it takes to fix, why would we compromise, right? And so you really just have to, you have to demonstrate that in your work, because anybody can say that, right? But acting on it is something that, when it's a cash flow negative event, I mean, I've spent more money than the last amount of money that I got, right? On principle, because I gave my word, right? I have ticked other insurance adjusters off who said, oh, well, you're greedy. I gave you $96,000. Why are you fighting for the last four? And I say, because we're convinced that we've done an accurate job at estimating this loss. We've worked with the person who's going to do it. He's talked to the suppliers who are going to supply it. He's talked with the subcontractors who are going to subcontract it. What else do you need to know? He knows what his overhead is, right? And he knows what his required return on these projects are. So if we know all that, then it's 100. It's not 96. So maybe you think of course, the insurance adjusters at times want to, put on the public adjuster that, he's greedy or, gaslight or do these things that, try to shame you or whatever. But I guess if you hadn't done all that work and you weren't convicted, then maybe that might be right. But on the other hand, if you've done all that work and you've worked with those people and you know that those costs are accurate, why would you compromise, right? If in just anything, like if you're selling a car and you know that everybody sold that car today for $10,000, why would you take 9? I mean, you just wouldn't, right? And so it's just a matter of difference in how a public adjuster operates. Instead of, as a contractor, just, using the public adjuster that took you to play golf or using the public adjuster that, did something nice for you or, has, a party at his house and invites you or whatever. You should really dig into like, how are you doing the business? How much do you know construction and how much are you going to consider the long-term value of my clients, which ultimately,
that was my next question.
if you're putting the long-term value of the clients, which means getting all the money so they can fix all the things with the right way, with the right materials, then ultimately, indirectly, that benefits the contractor because he's getting a full fair price, right?
Okay, so I have a question, Chat, that you just mentioned that PA might not get you that $4,000 out of that $96,000 just because he doesn't want to mess up his relationship with the adjuster, and that ultimately costs the contractor. So how can a contractor identify that a PA isn't giving his full energy or his full dedication to this specific claim?
The way you identify it is you have that conversation and you pose that hypothetical and you ask directly before you start referring clients, and you just come forward and say, what do you do in this situation? What kind of commitment to the client can you make? Because otherwise I'm going to eat $4,000 because as the contractor, I'm going to finish the job with the best materials, the way it's possible, the best way possible. And in the end, if you don't go get it, I'm going to eat the $4,000, right? So I'm obviously not going to keep doing that if you can't make this kind of commitment to your clients, right? That's how you identify it. Now, how do you guarantee it? Just time. You work a bunch of claims together and you see if they do what they say they're going to do, right?
Okay.
But that's why this is one of the first conversations I have, because I feel like if I bring it up, to me, that's important as a contractor, right? So it always was. And so as a PA, when I'm talking to contractors, this is one of the first things that I bring up is, look, I'll work for the client. I work for the homeowner. I don't work for you. But I want you to know that when I care for them, that benefits you, right? Because this is kind of a tripod, right? Because if I don't get the claim paid correctly, then they don't have the budget, then you're going to be incentivized to use cheaper material. And I don't want you doing that. I don't want to be associated with a contractor who's using cheaper materials any more than the contractor wants a PA who's going to quit 96% through, right? And neither one of them want a homeowner who wants to just get all the money and then not do something, right? So it really is a tripod. And if you kick one of the legs out, it falls down, right? So these are all conversations that to identify them, as you ask, I think they need to be had on the forefront, before anything is done. And that is the best way to identify them and to make sure that everything is aligned on all three parts to make sure it's a good relationship.
And I also read in a Facebook group that Texas is some kind of different from all the states and it has some different insurance laws or something. Would you shine some light on that if I'm correct here?
There are some pretty unique things about Texas. Anything from, we do have prompt pay penalties where, if you're not paid within 5 days after an accepted claim, it starts accruing interest that can be at 12 to 13%, all the way up to like 18% per year. We do have misrepresentation rules that are on the book, that if anything's misrepresented or they deceive you on purpose, that you can go for 3 times the amount. We have some pretty unique fire laws, like with fire losses, where if it meets certain criteria, the rule is that they owe the full policy limit for the dwelling or the coverage A in 5 days. And there's no estimate. There's no, back and forth with supplements or depreciation. It's just check for the full amount, 5 days, done. And that's only on fire, only in Texas. We have some other rules that deal with water. One of the rules about water is the insurance is prohibited from doing anything that would cause confusion when it comes to handling a water claim, right? Because a lot of times water claims they involve ALE, they involve contents, they involve mitigation, they involve dry out, they involve demo, they involve build back, and just the crossover, because some guys do multiple parts of that. Some guys only do the MIT, and then another guy does the demo. You're going to have overlapping invoices. You're going to have overlapping approvals. Insurance's one of their favorite things that I see them try to do is double count money, right? Like, you've ever seen the old cartoons where the guy has the wad of bills folded in half, and he only has 10 $1 bills, but he counts them one way and then he counts them the other way, and he says, I got 20. Insurance like to do this, right? They like to double count money. Well, I paid the 30,000 over here, and you're like, but you're 15 short over here. Oh no, I paid 15 over here. Well, no, you didn't. You took 15 from the 30 and put it back over here. You can't double count it, right? These are the things that cause confusion to homeowners, right? And so they're prohibited from doing things that can cause confusion on a water claim, just because this is my interpretation, is that the reason that they started thinking about making that rule is they didn't want it to be confusing, because they're inherently complex and they are inherently confusing. And so they wanted to make a rule that said you can't make it confusing. Sometimes you can't reconcile what money went to what without asking for a loss run or a check run or a payment breakdown allocated to which group it went to, right? And this is one of the things that contractors really either get or don't get. And I've seen it both ways. But if you're a contractor and you do everything, you do the MIT, you do the dry out, you do the demo, and you do the build back, and you move the contents and put it in storage, if you just have one big invoice, you are not getting approved very fast, right? There's different buckets of insurance, and you should really structure your construction company appropriately to where the things that fall in one group go on. It doesn't have to be a different invoice or anything, like different company. I've seen guys like make like 14 different companies. You don't have to do all that, but you do need to categorize subtotals, right? Based on what the insurance needs to evaluate. So the contents need to go in one bucket, right? The build back need to go in a different bucket, right? The mitigation needs to be part of the build back, but it needs to be separated. So almost like a subtotal and a subtotal. These are the small things that you can do with your transactional paperwork that will really cultivate like a faster processing and faster approval process on the insurance company. As a PA, I have to do that. And so when I get one where it's all jammed into one, a lot of the complaints with PAs, well, they take too long. Well, these are the type of things that have to be done. And if you didn't know, I hope that you're listening to this right now, because if you just take if you take that and you break it down, or you work with the PA to figure out what bucket different activities go in and how that has to be classified when you make your claim. If you go ahead and do that, you're going to save the public adjuster a few days just dissecting it, because nobody calls it the same. Nobody bills the same. Some people are on QuickBooks. Some people are on AccuLink. Some people are on, different various, transactional paper generating software or whatever. And so that's fine. You can use whatever you want to use, but the way that you structure the subtotals and making sure that they line up with the categories that the insurance require them to be submitted in, that way they can be analyzed. A lot of times nowadays, the insurance is so decentralized. They have one person evaluating the mid, one person evaluating the contents, one person evaluating the build back, and then another person that's kind of overseeing all of it. Right. You have it all in one, then everybody gets the same copy. It's just, you're asking for a communication nightmare, right? Because it's so decentralized on their side. And so you kind of have to understand like the map of and the hierarchy of like how they've structured their corporate structure and their different levels of management, because they're breaking your invoice up so they can, allegedly process it faster, right? So don't take, that potential opportunity and turn it into a threat or a thing that works against you, because you just jammed everything into one big bill and said, here you go, right? Because somebody's going to have to dissect that. And then when it doesn't get paid and then you hire a PA, don't get mad at the PA for taking too long or whatever, because you don't have the pictures to justify each one, because all of that has to be unraveled on every single claim. And I know there's guys out there right now going, it's not that complicated. I get these things paid all the time. You usually can get by with the adjusters doing some work. There's a lot of good adjusters out there that are not lazy, but I can tell you that from experience that most of the time when it doesn't work, it's the one that matters. It's the one that's quite a bit of money, right? It's the one that you're counting on. It's the one that you need to put in the bank, and you can't put it in the bank if it's in processing and everybody's trying to untangle this big knot. And so you're not doing yourself any justice. And it doesn't take much, maybe a few visits with a public adjuster that's good and can explain that to you. And then you just kind of go back to your accounting department and say, hey, how are we going to show that we billed for this? Or how are we going to bill for this? Or how are we going to split these invoices up? And sure, you don't get paid for that, but go up to the office, grab some coffee, go up on a Saturday, spend some time, invest in your business, solve it once, and then you don't ever have to do it again.
Cool. You just mentioned that it is one thing that you have to categorize and split up your invoices and make subtotals that make it easier for the PA to do his job, and it also makes easier for the insurance company to split your invoices. What are the other things besides this that a roofer or a contractor can do in order to make your job easier?
Label your pictures. Label your pictures and have a map. I don't care if you draw it on a napkin. Have a map and take pictures that, I guess, twofold. Make it to where someone who's never been to the house, who's looking at everything from a computer, can tell what picture goes to what part of the house. Either an indexing system, a map with pictures labeled 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Where you draw the numbers on the house where you took the picture, something. Come up with some way, work with your PA or devise a way internally if you're not using a PA, but you need to be able to prove what picture came from what piece or part or room or side or elevation or what part of the roof. Where did that picture come from, right? That's the first thing. And the second thing is, if all your pictures are like this close, you're not getting anything approved. They don't even know if it's the right house, right? So take your pictures far away, and then middle, and then up close. And if you have to, get a pointer, and when you take the up close one, point to the thing that's broken, right? Like if you're taking a picture far away on where you see the whole side of the house, and then medium where there's like 2 windows, and then up close where there's just 1 window. I don't know if you're showing me a window screen, a vinyl bead, a broken glass. I don't know if you're showing me the window seal. I don't know if you're showing me the trim. I don't know what you're showing me, right? Especially like if it's like hail where there's like a super small crack. And then conversely, if I just have this super zoomed up microscope, picture of a crack, I'm like, where's this coming from, right? That is huge. Both if you're trying to help your public adjuster speed up, or if you're just trying to speed your claims up where you're submitting them straight to the insurance company, trying to help them out. That's what's going to show them the compelling empirical evidence that they need to get these things, approved. The other thing that we do that I've taught some contractors to do is do kind of like an executive summary, right? Have like a a note set of what trades are involved. And yes, it's just one window, but that window is going to have to come out. It's going to ruin some drywall. And so there was no leaks in the house. But when we go in that, when we take the window out, it's going to ruin that drywall. So we are going to get into the interior, and there is an interior need for a drywall tradesman and a painter, right? You can't see that from a photo, right? Train your guys good enough on the construction processes, even if they're just sales guys, that they know when that window comes out, it's going to break either the siding or it's going to break the drywall, right? Or if there's no fins on it, that you can just pop it out, pop it in. Or if the homeowner's cool with just reglazing, that you can just pop the glass out, pop it in. Know your processes, and when you're taking your pictures, have a little cheat sheet that says, hey, you know, this is a window. I've got it far away, medium, and up close. I'm showing you the crack. But also on this window number 4, on side number 2, reference the map. It's going to involve some drywall and some paint, right? That's super helpful.
Wow.
Right? That's when you're showing the PA what he needs to estimate, what you expect, what price ultimately you're going to get to, because that's extra work. And you're also showing the insurance adjuster which window it is and which one's cracked, right? Now, maybe he says that, you know, a bird pooped on it and that's why it's cracked and he doesn't cover it. You know, who knows what he says, but at least he's got the evidence. He knows where it's at. He knows what's wrong with it. He knows how you're going to try to fix it. And he knows what trades. That way he understands why you're arguing O&P, because it is complex, because you do have, you know, interior trades, you do have coordination. Not that that's not a rule that's made up, but right. I see that online too. You know, they're, O&P because it's complex. Well, that's made up. That's not a real rule. But you know what? If that works with the insurance company and you're not using a PA and that's what you're doing this and showing him why those other trades are involved on which window and which side of the house, and showing a map and having little notes, and then having far away, medium, and up close, you're doing everything in the world you possibly can. Sure, maybe it takes another 30, 45 minutes on the inspection, but if you incorporate it on the front side, then there's not multiple trips back, because I've been there, you know, like, it's like, well, you know, there's another $3,000 in supplements, but I'm gonna have to go back out there 2 more times, meet a window guy, set all this up from the front, so you have all the data, and when you turn it in, you know that you've done your best, right? Because those trips back and forth, you're gonna eat that $3,500 up real quick, right? And it's not efficient. Set all that up from the first. Those are the things you can do. Take good pictures. That's what I mean when I say good pictures. And then label them, and then have like a little note set that goes with it that kind of tells anybody who's never been there what's going on.
Cool. And before we dive into the disputes and appraisals, I just have another question about this. Like, let's say I am getting into roofing and I am new to this and I don't know, I'm not familiar with the insurance claims and the policies. How can I read an insurance policy before I hand it over to you? Like, what are the things that a roofer should be looking in an insurance policy if he is in front of the homeowner? Someone read it. What are the key points?
Well, the problem, and this is a real problem, particularly in the states that I'm working, you can't get the policy. No one can get the policy. Even if you ask the agent, they're going to give you like a shorthand version called the deck page. You can't get it. I have a difficult time getting it. You know, the attorneys that we recommend to claims, that they have a hard time getting it, right? It's very difficult to get the policy, like the real policy. If you get the real policy, it's 60 to 90 pages, right? There's no good way to answer that, because you have to be learned enough that you know when you have the real policy to then go look at it and figure out what's in it. Right. And I have had people ask 6, 7, 8 times and get something from the insurance company that's not the policy, that the insurance company said, here's the policy. Well, yeah, we already gave that to you. Here it is again. As if, you know, like you just lost it. Right. And of course we didn't lose it. They never gave it to us to begin with. So I would really caution contractors from trying to read policies and interpret them. There's a lot that goes into that. There's a lot that goes into the rules of the state. Sometimes the policy, like for instance, if the rules of the policy go against the rules of the state, then many times the rules of the state will prevail. So the policy can say, you know, you can't do this, but the rules of the state say you can, and you really have to know which one's going to win, right? So that's a very dangerous territory. Fortunately and unfortunately, I don't think we have to worry about it, because even homeowners can't get their policy. Contrary to what a lot of defense attorneys are saying on LinkedIn, They say, oh, yeah, all you got to do is ask for it. Or, oh, yeah, everybody gets it whenever they buy it from the very get-go. I've seen them pontificate about that over and over and over and over again. And I mean, I've done thousands of claims, and it's a trend that no, you can't, so I don't know what universe that they're living in, but yeah, it's a really difficult thing to do, to get the real policy, a certified copy that they get notarized and say, this is the real policy. That's very difficult to get. And it usually takes a few weeks because they'll mail it to you. So if I don't have that, we had a big freeze in Texas back in 21. And I was working a bunch of water claims, and homeowners did get their policy because, I kind of coached them through what to tell their agent. And, we tried 2, 3, 4 times. We finally got a hold of the policy. We read it, and it said, hey, you don't have coverage for something. Well, I just thought that was weird. And so I asked the carrier, like corporate, said, I need a certified copy. I need one that you swear and notarize is the true copy. Well, when we got that copy, and this happened more than 24 times, okay, when I got the real copy that they swore on, it said we do have coverage, but the copy that the homeowner had said there was not coverage. So they're giving the homeowner the one that says that they don't have coverage, so they don't ask for coverage, right? But if you really dig in and you force them to give you the real one, there is coverage. So once we got that, immediately we got paid.
Isn't it
Because
illegal?
they're like, well, I'm not a lawyer, but I don't think I don't think anybody would look at that very fondly, because you're totally misrepresenting what the policy is. And of course they'll say it's an accident. They did say it was an accident. But it happened like over 24 times this happened, right? And so I'm like, that's not an accident. An accident, I fall off my bike like once, a year or something, 24 times in a day, that's not an accident. Something's going on, right? So, yeah, I mean, that's another thing about policies. You got to know when you're dealing with the real one or not the real one. And if, you should never take anybody's word for it until you know that you have the real one, until you know that they swore and got it notarized and there's a stamp that says this is the real deal. That's the only time that I'll look at it for coverage to try and figure out, what we should do. And that takes like 2 or 3 weeks, sometimes 5 weeks, just to get. Sometimes I never get it. There's a company in Texas that won't give it to you ever. I've never gotten it from them. They just refuse to give it. And then they say have the homeowner ask for it. And then the homeowner asks, and they cut pages out. Like the page about appraisal, they cut it out. They don't want you to know how to go to appraisal or what their appraisal clause says, right? So I don't know how it's legal. I can't imagine that it is, but it is the world we live in. And so it is definitely something to be cautious of. And yet just another reason why you do need, in these circumstances, especially when the stakes are high, it's a high dollar claim, you do need a public adjuster who has seen that, experience with it, knows when they're looking at it, who can interpret it, and then work with you. Because the last thing you want to do is go do a bunch of work that might not get paid, and then you have to run down the homeowner and play bill collector to a homeowner who doesn't have the money, and maybe they're never going to get it because there's no coverage. Right? And that's, that was one of my fears as a contractor is, what if I do it and now I have to go, that's just a bad scenario. Just another reason why you really need to, everybody should stay in their lane, but cooperate, right? And that's one of the ways you can do that.
And talking about disputes, what are the common type of disputes that normally happen between homeowners and the insurance, and how like a roofer or a contractor can be aware of them, and what are their solutions?
How the contractor can be what?
Yeah, like how a contractor can be aware of these problems or these issues, and what are their solutions? Yeah.
A lot of the time the homeowner has one set of concerns. The contractor has a different set of concerns. And the PA has a completely different set of concerns. And then if there's an appraiser or an attorney involved, they have completely different set of concerns. It doesn't mean that one set of concerns is more important, but there's definitely an order to which concerns you should address first, right? And that's another talk that I like to have, like right off the bat, is, hey, look, I hope everybody trusts that, I've got the experience to know which concerns we're going to put at the first and which ones we're going to put at the second and which ones at the third. Because things change in a claim. And so what was important yesterday might not be important tomorrow, right? There's deadlines, there's time frames. You've got another party acting. You've got the insurance company acting. So something that they do might, cause you to need to do something that yesterday you didn't need to do anymore. And so I see a lot of times homeowners get caught up on one thing and just want to solve it.
Okay.
And, sometimes that's bad because sometimes it doesn't need to be solved. Sometimes it's not important. Sometimes there's 3 or 4 things that are way more important that need to happen first before you get there. And sometimes it's just the insurance company talking to them behind the scenes and giving them concerns that aren't real just to create dissension, right? Because it's like, I think it was The Art of War, Sun Tzu, who said, like, you divide and conquer,
Yes.
right? And I see a lot of that going on. So these are some of the, things that you need to be aware of, but it can change so fast that you just need to work with somebody or a group of people, contractor and PA, appraiser, whatever, that know which concerns in that scenario need to go first. That's what's most important, right? Is knowing how to prioritize what you need to do next. And a lot of times that boils back to things that the PA is responsible for, like statutes and policy and time frames that the insurance company can put you under. There's certain things they can do that you only have a certain set of time to do it, and contractors aren't responsible for that.
Can you explain this by an example?
Yeah, like a proof of loss is one of them. Right. So every insurance policy that I've ever read says that one of your duties is to produce a proof of loss.
Okay.
Right. Well, only a public adjuster, a power of attorney, an attorney, or a homeowner or an agent in many, many states, only those 5 people can do a proof of loss and turn it in. That's it. Nobody else can do it. That's prohibited, right? But it's a requirement, right? And that's how you're proving your loss, because in an insurance policy, you have to prove your loss and the insurance gets to accept it or deny it. They don't get to tell you what your claim is. You get to pick what your claim is, but they have to accept it or deny it, right? But you have to prove it. Well, this proof of loss is a stack of papers. It's the pictures, the photos, the estimates, the measurements, everything all together. It says, hey, here's my claim. Every insurance policy that I've ever read says you have to produce the proof of loss, right? And there's different states, different time frames, but it's 60 days, 90 days. Sometimes it's after the loss. Sometimes it's after they request it. Well, if you're the contractor and you're going along and say it says after the insurance requests it, you have 60 days to turn it in. Well, they're not going to request it from the contractor. They're going to request it from the homeowner. And it's going to be on page 7, paragraph 3 at the very end of the paragraph. The homeowner's not going to read that. If he does read it or she reads it, she's not going to know that that's like really critical, right? And so then say 70 days goes by and the contractor then finishes and turns in a supplement. The insurance is going to be leaning on that, going, oh, you broke the contract. You broke the contract. And of course they'll say, no, we never do that. We don't ever. I've seen it happen, right? Oh, you broke the contract. You didn't turn this in. It's too late. We don't owe you this supplement, right? Well, then the contractor's like, well, it's already done. It's too late, right? Now the homeowner's like, well, I can't pay it. And the contractor's like, well, you have to pay it. We have to make your insurance pay it. And the homeowner's like, well, they're not going to pay it. And the insurance is just sitting back there going, haha, look at all these people fighting, right? But that's an example of a timeline that can be completely unknown, that is very critical. It's a requirement of every policy I've ever read. And, I've seen them literally on paragraph 3, page 7, the last line, it says, oh, and turn your proof of loss in. I mean, the letter wasn't even talking about that. They just slipped it in there, right? So you really have to pay attention, because you missed that. It's a contract. You promise to do certain things, they promise to do certain things. So if they can point to something that you didn't do, that you promised to do, they can try to say, well, you broke the deal, so we're going to break the deal, right? And, that fleshes out different ways. And, there's going to be people watch this and say, well, I know how to fix that or whatever. But the thing about it is be aware of it and just don't let it happen in the first place. And then you don't have to solve a problem that doesn't come up.
And as far as what I have got from this conversation is that you have to make the insurance company first agree that there is a coverage that they have to do, and then there are the next steps. And I also read somewhere that there is a difference between a coverage and a value, and most people think that if the insurance has agreed or to cover that damage, they are going to provide the same value as well. So I am not an expert in this. What is the exact difference between a coverage and the value?
Well, coverage just means that they're on the hook for it. Right? The value is, until it's finished, is whoever's opinion of that wrote the estimate. Right? So public adjusters exceed insurance adjusters. There were public adjusters way before insurance adjusters. I think it was around like the 1950s that insurance adjusters came out. And it's thought that the reason that they came about was the insurance wanted to send an adjuster out there and make an offer so they could control the value narrative, right? Because obviously, if your house gets hit by a tornado, obviously it's covered, right? It's gone, or it's halfway gone, right? And there's nothing they could do about it, right? But with what I feel like, and there's other people that think this, they got insurance adjusters to run out there, be really nice, and offer some money, right? Because if they offer, say you had a $200,000 limit, and they come out there and they give you $120,000, most people have never had $120,000, right? And they think, oh, look how nice my insurance company is, right? And what you're not thinking about is the other $80,000, right? So the value and the coverage is really decoupled. And, this is what I tell people. I say, look, they're going to do their process. They're going to send their adjuster. They're going to do all this, but that's all voluntary, right? We're going to do our process. We're going to do our proof of loss. That's required, right? So if while we're working on our process and we're trying to finish that up, if they do something that we don't like, don't worry about it. We're not finished yet, right? Because what they're doing is voluntary, right? What they're doing is in their best interest, right? Whether it's good or bad for us, whatever, right? But when we get done, we're going to have fulfilled our requirements, and then we're going to look to them to, if they have made a mistake, correct it, right? But then all of our duties are done. And so nobody can point the finger at us and say, hey, you had a list of 8 things you had to do. You didn't do 2 of them. Right? You do all of them, and then you say, okay, now the ball's in your court. What are you going to do? Right? So then it's coverage, like you said, and then it's value. And those 2 things are separate, right? Coverage, I would say is more important, and it should go first. And then value after you establish coverage.
And then there are appraisals as well. So let's just say you are not agreeing or you are not coming on terms with the insurance company. So when is the right time to file an appraisal or to request
Well,
one?
that depends on what state you're in. That really depends on what state you're in. And you should there's a book about this thick that goes over every single different state and the appraisals and how the rules are different. Some states, the appraisal is binding on both parties. Some it's binding on neither. Some states, it's only binding on the party that invokes it. You really need to know that. But in a nutshell, the idea of appraisal is to set the value. Now, there's some states that are antithetical to this, but for the most part, traditionally and probably, what happens the most is appraisal is there for when there's a broken window and the insurance agrees that it's covered and you agree that it's covered and they agree, that the whole window needs to get fixed and you agree that the whole window needs to get fixed, but the insurance says 1 penny and you say $1 million, right? There's basically agreement all the way across except what's the value, right? That is traditionally, what appraisal, is for the most part. I'm having to qualify all this because different states are very, very different. But for the most part, that would be a case where you could go to appraisal, right? And say, hey, look, I disagree with you. You disagree with me. I'm going to pick a person. You're going to pick a person. Those 2 people are going to get together and pick a third tie-breaking umpire vote. And then the 3 of those, we're going to call that the panel. And then the panel's going to decide what the value of this window is.
Okay, let's just say you filed an appraisal and you are feeling that the negotiations that you are having aren't going anywhere. So what would you do next?
Well, you don't have the negotiations once you file, once you invoke appraisal.
Okay.
Right? You stop negotiations, right? So, like, let's say I'm a public adjuster and I invoke appraisal, on a claim or whatever. First of all, the homeowner has to do it, but say the homeowner invokes appraisal. We name, Bob, our appraiser. The insurance names Jim, their appraiser. At that point, it's Bob and Jim, and then they pick a third person, Sally, right? And then Bob, Jim, and Sally, they get together and they set the value, right? And then when they get the value, they bring it back to us in the form of what's called an award. They give it to us and they give it to the insurance and they say, hey, here's what we decided. And then it should be that that's the end of it. And in many states, that is the end of it. And the insurance pays that amount or, the difference of what, that amount was versus what they'd already paid. They get credit for what they've paid. And then you go do the work and it's done.
So as we are heading towards the end, I just want to ask you that let's just say an insurance company is like lowballing the claim and the homeowners aren't doing anything about it or can't do anything about it. So what should a contractor do? Like what should be the step-by-step approach of a PA or a contractor if the insurance company is kind of lowballing the claim?
Well, the first thing you need to do is figure out why. There's 3 ways that a claim can be short. They can omit items, and that's like leaving things off the shopping list, right? There's items that just aren't on their estimate whatsoever. Okay. The second way is they can under quantify the square footage, or they can be wrong on the quantity of things, right? And then the third thing, or the third way it can be short, is they can underestimate the quality or the value of a single thing, right? So an example of the first one is, let's say that you're working up tall and you need heavy material up tall. They can omit a telehandler or a lift to get the material up there. There's no tractor to get the material up there, right? So they've estimated everything properly, but there's no way to get it up there. So you can't do the job unless the cost of the tractor, say it's a few $1,000, which is typical, right? Comes out of somewhere, right? Yes. It comes out of the homeowner's pocket. It comes out of the contractor's pocket. It's got to come from somewhere, right? And that's an omission, right? That they've omitted something that's required to do the job. An example of the second one is, the backsplash goes behind the refrigerator. And they've given you 20 linear feet or square feet of backsplash. But when the adjuster for the insurance was there, he didn't do it on purpose. But, he didn't pull the refrigerator out and look behind it to see, oh, there's 25 square feet because it goes behind the refrigerator, right? And so then in that case, that's a second example where they've underestimated the quantity, right? The third example, and I've got a good example of this one. I was working on a house in Dallas not too long ago, and Xactimate has different quality levels. It has standard grade, premium grade, ultra premium grade, super ultra premium grade. I mean, it's got 3 or 4 different standards for material. You got builder grade, and then you've got, really high end, say like windows, whatever. Well, we were working on, there was a fireplace that had to get replaced, and the fireplace had this, we'll call it marble for argument's sake. It had this marble around it, right? And this marble came from Spain. And it was not just marble from Spain, it was marble from a very specific mine in Spain. And not just a mine, it came from a very specific vein in a very specific mine from Spain.
Okay.
So once it's gone, it's gone. Yes. And there's only so much, right? And it has to all match, and it did all match because you could see the veins and they were all matching the way that it was, right? And so we go into estimate this and we plug in, marble and we do 10 square feet, whatever it was, right? And then of course it was a nice house. So we put, the top quality that was available in the software. It was 1/3 of the cost, and it didn't even include shipping it back over here. So I think we ended up at an Xactimate. We ended up at $24,000, and it ended up to costing $80,000 to get this fireplace done for this marble. Right? Well, obviously everybody was, blowing fuses everywhere because they're like, "Why are you $80,000 for a fireplace?" Well, she had the receipts from a couple years ago, and that's about what she had spent, right? And it was just a really, really nice house. But that's an example of where these quality levels are set in Symbility or they're set in Xactimate, and they're preset like a cookie cutter. And in real life, sometimes, that cookie cutter model is not representative of what the loss is or what the cost is going to be to fix it. It doesn't have to be on the high end. It can be on the medium grade level. But, these guys that write this software, they're doing these brackets of this is low quality. This is medium quality. Well, if you're in the middle there, right, or you're far away, or, there's a lot of different variables where it can jump you from one to the other. And there's a lot of protocol on the insurance company's side because they're dealing with a bunch of stuff. They're processing mass volume. And one of the ways your estimate can be low is you're in the wrong quality category, and what's going to be experienced, or what the only thing that's available, or what's necessary, is a different quality, right? So what the contractor needs to do is identify, like, okay, I'm getting lowballed, or he feels like he's getting lowballed, right? Make a list and say, okay, what are the things that they omitted that I need? Why do I need them? Make a list. What are the things that I say there's more of that they say there's less of? Make a quantity list. And then how much more quantity do you need on each one? And then quality list. Which things did they pay $5 on that I need $10 on? And it's a quality issue, right?
Yes.
And make a list. And then name them that. Name them omissions, quantity, quality. And then it's kind of like a comparison analysis between where they're at and where you're at. And then present that. Right? Because then you have a very objective model of what's going on, right? Now, if you are not met with, any kind of reasonableness, or it gets dismissed, or, they stop talking to you or whatever, that's when you should start talking to a public adjuster. And guess what? As soon as you get the public adjuster, if you've done this type of work, the public adjuster is going to get done that quick. He's going to know exactly what the problem is, exactly what to do. He's going to have the cheat sheet right there ready to go. You've already taken your pictures. You've backed those up. They're far away, medium, up close. You got the pointer pointing at the damage. All right. You know what side it is, map. You can easily figure that out because you have a very tangible, objective template to go off of. And that's an easy thing to talk about at that point, because everybody has the same blueprint, if you will.
It was definitely a valuable answer. And yeah, so as we are heading towards the end, AI is here, and I see a lot of roofers are using tools like ChatGPT in their insurance claims. And they say, I had a couple of episodes back, I had Leah Schwartz from Landmark Roofing in Indiana. She told me that she is using ChatGPT to file insurance claims because it kind of changes the words into the words or verbiage that the insurance company understands. How do you see a future of insurance claims with AI and tech?
Well, I'm kind of cautious with it. I've leaned on it, and I've seen it hallucinate and give me made up information. And that kind of deterred me from really investing. At that point, I thought, you know what, I'm going to wait until it gets a little bit better. But I am starting to see where it's getting really, really good, and I've started to use it and taking what I just said, the quantity, quality, omission thing.
Yeah.
So I built a little script and load a picture of the insurance estimate, and then I load a picture of our estimate. When they, tell us, no, we're not paying anything, it's just like a general, we're not doing it. I say, hey, break these two things down and tell me which things are in this one but not in that one, and make a list and tell me the total. And then I say, tell me the things that are more square footage on this one and less square footage on this one, and break those down and tell me how many square feet and what the dollar amount is. And then make me a list of things that are lower quality here and higher quality here, and what's the difference and the dollar amount, and break that down and make this cheat sheet for me. And I have seen it be very successful in that, almost in like the high 90% accuracy. I still have a human double check it, but just to get the brunt of that work done and give you like a template, especially formatting it, it speeds the workflow up a lot. And I would suggest that contractors or roofers look into something like that, to where, they're like, well, I heard this crazy PA talking about making these 3 lists and doing all this extra work. And they're thinking in their brain, oh my gosh, I don't have enough time to do what I'm doing, much less do this extra stuff. Right. Well, I would encourage them to look into AI to do that, because that will do very accurately 90-95%. A lot of the heavy lifting won't take you a little bit extra time, but it'll save you so much time in your approval and your cash to cash cycle. And you'll get approvals faster. Your PA will love you. It'll make him or her faster. Your appraiser will love you. On the State Farm appraisals, you have to do this. you absolutely have to do this. So, if you already have it because you kind of trained your AI, then I think you're ahead of the curve. And that's the first part of AI that I think is the most practical that we can start embracing right now. Now, I know it's kind of doing some other stuff, but right now, I think that's the thing that everybody could embrace.
Perfect. And besides estimates, do you see any other capabilities of the current versions of AI in insurance claims? Like, do you feel there are any other areas where the AI can be utilized, particularly if we talk about insurance?
Yeah, I can think of a lot of things,
Yeah.
but I've seen attempts at that, and I don't think it's there yet. Analyzing damage, interpreting policy, even creating cliff notes on policy, case law, looking that up. I've seen many different attempts in each one of those categories, and those would be very helpful. And I think that, we probably will see the day where it can do things of that nature. But those are all pretty critical things that you don't need to get wrong. And the attempts that I've seen in those instances have not been anywhere close to the 30% accuracy range, much less 90. That's why not necessarily creating estimates, but analyzing the difference between the estimates and doing like a summary of the differences. I think that's the most practical that it's very well equipped to do, today in 2025.
Thank you so much for your time, Chad. It was really pleasure having you on the show, and we tried to have a conversation that can be of maximum value to the contractors, to the PAs, and to the homeowners if they are watching this. So, any signing of notes or advice you have for the contractors?
The contractors?
Yeah.
Put in the Saturdays to work on the things that don't necessarily make you money right now, but that will save you time down the road, because build the things that once they're built, you have them forever. That's the best thing you can do for your business.
Thank you so much for your time, Chad, and thank you for being here. And yeah, have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye bye.